think we all know that fear is a really big factor when you're trying to get started in business, but not everybody necessarily realizes how crippling it can be to let your fear get the best of you when you're trying to build a brand, especially when you're trying to build an authentic brand that gets you noticed. And so throughout my years in business, I've dealt with people who have all the goods. They have the experience, they have the knowledge, the wisdom. And the only thing that's holding them back is all those inner voices, all of that indecision. And as a result, you see people who have all of the makings for a really strong, really interesting brand waver. They go back and forth, and they end up kind of coming out into the world mediocre. I wanted to hear a little bit about your journey leading up to this new business. So tell us about this new business.
Yeah, the new business is I teach the clear path process, and it's something I've done for 20 years, and I named it purely because I had to have something to put on my business cards, my website, and to call it. And I just called it my meditation. It's a little different from other meditation, but what I do is I teach people the process to help them address fear in a different way, but finding the noble purpose beneath the fear.
Yeah.
And once you found the noble purpose, which is not my phrase, I borrowed that phrase with permission from the co-founders of More to Life.
Oh, cool.
And the noble, when you find the noble purpose, what you do is you find that it has run through all kinds of misinformation, things we misunderstood when we were little itty bitty and weren't capable of logical thought, things that we start to believe through traumatic situations that are just not correct or no longer applicable. And when our noble purpose gets run through these wrong things and these fearful things, it gets acted out in a weird way. And so what we do is we address the fear, we find the noble purpose, and we fulfill it in a different way. Mm-hmm. So you don't have the problem or the fear. Much less of it.
But there's a few things that I've really picked up or that have made a big difference for me in overcoming fear. And I would say hands down, the number one thing that's helped me when I'm in those times of kind of feeling frozen and not like I can move forward is somebody to talk it out with.
Yes.
And so like the truth is, if you're sitting alone and you're trying in isolation to overcome your fear, you're doing it the hard way. What are some of the fears that you've worked with people on who run businesses, who are trying to make a name for themselves? What do you think are some of the really common contenders? Or
imposter syndrome is huge.
Oh,
imposter syndrome is huge. And I kept reading about it because I understood it. And there are a couple ways to go about imposter syndrome. And one man wrote that imposter syndrome is real common in like graduate students who are just learning how to do what they're going to do, and yet they still have to do it, or interns, and yet they still have to do it, and they know they're in a learning phase. So they feel like imposters because they're not through all that academic learning yet, and they don't have a lot of experience. So they're not imposters, but they are in a learning phase. And so it's common there. And it's common, I think, among entrepreneurs. Oh,
yes.
That's what it said. And I have felt that I don't feel anymore. My problem with imposter syndrome was that I developed the process I do. And I wanted and was raised with the idea that if someone else didn't give you a degree or certificate, a license, and okay, then you couldn't do it. It wasn't real. Or it wasn't okay to say, this is what I do, this is what I am, well, the fact is when you develop something, there's absolutely no one to give you that okay. No one. Another one is this idea that, this is a desperation, but there's a fear beneath the desperation. I have to do it all, but I don't have time.
Okay.
I have to do it all, but I don't know how. I have to do it all, but in other words, I can't do it all, but I must, or else.
Okay.
But the desperation is in this trying to do it all now before too late. You know, I have to get the website up before the book is up. Yeah, that makes sense. I have to have the pay button on my website. I have to have all my marketing words before I.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. It's
almost
the all or nothing, right?
Yeah. And the fear is what will happen if I don't? Oh, I'll look like a fool. I won't make money. I won't get clients.
Yeah, I've seen this one too. I know exactly what it's the feeling like you have to get all your ducks in a row. Feeling like, you know, starting before everything is ready will lead to failure. Oh. And, you know, how many people have started with very little? They do not have their ducks in a row. And, you know, I would wager that those are the people that get stuff done, right? And yes, all of those people standing there trying to get their ducks in a row are watching everybody else take off. So what do you tell those people?
I think that's where ignorance is bliss, when you don't know what you need to do.
Oh my God, you're so right. That's like ignorance is a branding gift.
It's so funny. It's so funny. So a business consultant I know, Lauren Midgley. Yeah, I'm going to drop names because these people have helped me, and I think they do great work. Lauren Midgley has had a client who couldn't seem to get her website going, and she finally said, what is holding you back truly? And she said, well, I want to put these, I'm going to paraphrase. I want to put these 7 pages up and I just can't seem to get them all. I have to have them all written before I put them up. And Lauren said, no, you don't. Go for 70% of perfection. Make sure it's correct.
Yeah.
Make sure it's correct, but go for 70% of what you want up there. Get 2 or 3 of the main pages up. You can add the other ones later. And it just took a load off this woman.
This is my first Blab. I've been watching Blabs over the past month, and I was mentioning to Camille that my way of coping with fear is over preparing, overthinking, but especially the over preparing piece. And so I was sharing that. Thank you. I was sharing that where I would normally have basically written out an entire script. The whole reason why I think Blab is so great, and I'm looking at your name in the comments as though you're right there, but the reason I think that Blab is so great is because you do not need to over prepare for a conversation, and you shouldn't. So over preparing just kind of takes away from what you can really achieve here on Blab. And so I have this little card that and that's all that I've allowed for myself. That's all the preparing that I did. And the truth is we're not even sticking to it. And that's cool. That's okay, because it's all about just jumping in and being okay with what happens and realizing like we tend to underestimate our ability to handle what we didn't expect. If things don't kind of go your way, we totally underestimate our ability to handle that.
We're so creative. It's stunning how creative we are. And when I work with people in the process, I do, and some of them even say, I'm not really creative. I'm not going to see anything. They're just amazed, and I'm not. I'm pleased by it. It's just a joyous thing. But I see so much creativity in people that they had no clue about. And creativity has to do with that kind of response to things that all of a sudden just pop up, like a new thought in a Blab or something you didn't know would happen. And it doesn't take that long to have our creativity to create something to do well with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's a good point too, because if you're afraid, it's hard to be creative, right? It's hard to allow yourself the space to kind of, or do you think that's wrong?
No, it's correct. It pulls you, it pulls you back into this part of your brain. It's not, it doesn't just make it hard. It makes it like neurologically almost impossible to be creative. Yeah. A friend of mine, Linda Smarzik, wrote a book on that. And she talks about how once you're in fear, you go into fight, flight, or freeze.
Yeah.
And that takes over, and you're not using the creative parts of your brain as well. So when you calm, you can be creative and come up with different solutions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, we've got a question. How can we push past the fear when it starts taking over? So we kind of touched on it, but how about you dive in a little deeper into this idea of a noble purpose and what you actually do about it. What do you do with this thing?
You don't push past it.
Ooh.
You don't push past it. You say, come here. I want to listen. Come here and join me. And if you're really afraid, you might say, join me at a distance. But join me. I'm really wanting to hear what is underneath the fear. Now, perhaps you have this idea. Perhaps the fear is about, I don't want to look like an idiot. I don't want to, like if I have imposter syndrome, I don't want people to call me a fake and say I'm like cheating or lying because I'm pretending to be something I'm not. Yeah. Right? So here's one fear you might face. But what you do, so you have this idea, and so you set your idea aside. You may be correct, you may be incorrect. And so you go, in my process, you go into a visual landscape or scene, you let your subconscious create it, fill it in, you welcome in, and you ask the part of yourself, the subconscious part of yourself that is the spirit, to please join you. And it may appear, it can be anything. It's symbolic. Our subconscious talks for some symbol, so it's symbolic. It may look like a person. It may not. And you say, I really want to hear what is really, truly the noble purpose underneath why you are this fear, what this fear is about. And it may come up with, it can come up with all kinds of surprising things. So an example of a noble purpose is, I really want to keep you safe. You remember how badly it hurt in second grade when someone said, no, you're only 5, you shouldn't be in second grade, you're not supposed to be here, you're not allowed. You're not big enough, you're too little. Now, this didn't happen to me. I'm just making something up. But the fear might be to keep yourself from being called fake or from being excluded, because that's an excluding type thing. You don't belong here is very excluding. You know, and so these are great things to try to keep yourself included and safe. Nothing wrong with that. The problem is when the fear begins to take over, as you said, Brandon Cupid, when it begins to take over, then what you do is you welcome it, you hear its noble purpose, and through the process, there are other tools too, but through the process I teach, you begin to give that part of yourself that has handled keeping you safe and included by making sure you're always in the right place for your age and your size and what you know, you give it a new job. You give it a different job of being watchful, but you begin to take away, you ask it to leave its liabilities behind. So it's liabilities of always saying, oh my gosh, no, I'm too young, I can't even try it. Oh my gosh, they'll exclude me, I can't try it. I'm not going to do it. I'm afraid. I don't want to be excluded, so I'm going to go ahead and exclude myself. And you begin to see that you might find yourself, if you even imagine that you can go into this place you didn't think you could before and be included, that begins to open up all kinds of doors, because you are no longer presenting yourself as a person who doesn't belong. You're now presenting yourself as a person who might belong and who is exploring this, wherever a class you're in, or enterprise you're starting. You know, no one else started an enterprise doing this at 30, but I'm going to try it. Well, they'll say I'm too young. Yeah. Well, maybe I'm not. You know, this kind of thing. Maybe I'm not. Maybe it'll work out great. Maybe they'll love me. Yeah.
No, the age one is one that I've seen a lot with young entrepreneurs. And like, even when I started my business, I was 30. And I felt too young, you know. Michael says he looks 12. So you probably know exactly, you're probably familiar with this perception that, you know, with age comes ability. And of course, you know, experience matters. And with usually age and experience are somewhat related, but not always. You know, there are definitely, I think your experience is actually related to how much you've been able to overcome your fear and do things, you know, in your career and in your life, because somebody can live very safe for 20 years. And really, what is their experience worth? What have they learned?
You just made me feel better.
Why? What was that about?
Because sometimes I go, oh gosh, I wish I'd handled something differently. But the experience was so valuable.
I think what kind of came to me there, and what I realize often is when we talk about this branding thing, a a lot of like people have really built it up. They think that it's make or break, do or die. Like if I don't get it right, it's over, you know?
Yeah.
And really the first thing you have to do is realize branding is something that you affect every single time you make a business decision. It's not something you do once and it's this and it's done and you either succeeded or failed. That's not at all how branding happens. It is an organic process, and every single day you're shaping it a little bit at a time. And so you're not a Fortune 500 company with the masses of people waiting for you to fail. You are an entrepreneur who is human and is growing your brand one bit at a time. And you really, you need to remove the pressure that you can mess it up in one big fell swoop. You know, like as long as you're being true and, you know, not lying about what it is you're capable of doing, staying true to what feels right for you, you're not going to be so far off track that you're going to crash and burn.
And I think if you do get off what's true for you, then you can crash and burn, or at least cause yourself a lot of pain.
Well, it's when you're really only in danger when you are trying to pull something over on people. Mm-hmm. And, you know, most of us would never do that maliciously. Most of us would never do that in a scheming way. But it can happen when you let the pressure get to you, when you start to panic and feel like, you know, what you are isn't good enough. And there's always a way to succeed as your authentic self. This is what I believe wholeheartedly. And so once you believe that, you know, you never let yourself get pulled off track.